The air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and damp earth, as the temperature hovered at a chilly 48 degrees Fahrenheit on that fateful morning of September 17, 1944. The sky above was a deep, foreboding gray, with clouds that seemed to stretch on forever, like an endless canvas of slate and charcoal. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, as the Allied forces prepared to launch a massive airborne operation, codenamed Market Garden, in an effort to secure key bridges and roads deep behind enemy lines. In the distance, the sound of rumbling engines and the occasional burst of machine gun fire could be heard, as the Allied troops and their equipment were being transported to the drop zones. The soldiers, clad in their worn and weathered M1941 field jackets, with their M1 helmets securely fastened, and their M1 Garand rifles slung over their shoulders, stood nervously, checking and rechecking their gear, as they waited for the signal to board the waiting C-47 Dakota aircraft. The C-47, with its distinctive wing shape and twin engines, roared to life, as the pilots, seated in the cockpit, began to go through the pre-flight checks. The aircraft, with its serial number 421008882 emblazoned on the side of the fuselage, was a veteran of many missions, and its crew had been hand-picked for this critical operation. The pilot, a grizzled veteran with over 1,000 hours of flight time, adjusted his goggles and gave a thumbs up to the co-pilot as the engines revved up to full power. The soldiers, with their backpacks and equipment, began to file onto the aircraft, their faces set with determination, as they took their seats on the long, narrow benches that lined the interior of the plane. The air inside the aircraft was thick with the smell of fuel, sweat, and the faint tang of fear, as the troops steeled themselves for the ordeal that lay ahead. The doors of the aircraft closed with a loud clang, and the crew chief, a burly sergeant with a thick southern accent, gave a final check to the safety harnesses, before taking his position at the rear of the plane. As the aircraft taxied down the runway, the sound of the engines grew louder, and the airframe began to shake and vibrate, like a living thing. The soldiers, with their eyes closed and their hands clasped together, waited for the familiar sensation of liftoff, as the plane struggled to break free of the Earth's gravity. The wheels of the aircraft left the ground, and the C-47 soared into the sky, joining a formation of over 2,000 aircraft, all headed for the same destination, the small town of Arnhem, in the Netherlands. The formation, with its aircraft spaced at intervals of 1,000 feet, stretched out as far as the eye could see, a seemingly endless procession of planes, all carrying their precious cargo of troops, equipment, and supplies. The air was filled with the roar of engines, as the planes flew in a steady, unwavering stream, their contrails streaming out behind them, like a trail of white silk. The soldiers, with their eyes fixed on the horizon, felt a sense of pride and purpose as they gazed out at the breathtaking sight, knowing that they were part of something much bigger than themselves. As the formation flew on, the landscape below began to change, from the rolling hills and patchwork fields of England to the dense forests and winding rivers of the European mainland. The aircraft, with their cargo holds filled to capacity, flew steadily on, their crews scanning the horizon for any sign of enemy activity. The soldiers, with their faces set in determined lines, checked their gear and mentally prepared themselves for the battle that lay ahead as the aircraft flew deeper into enemy territory. The silence inside the aircraft was oppressive, punctuated only by the occasional burst of static from the radio, or the soft murmur of the crew as they worked to navigate the treacherous skies. The air was thick with tension, as the troops waited for the signal to jump, their hearts pounding in their chests like drums. The smell of sweat and the faint tang of fear hung heavy in the air, as the soldiers steeled themselves for the ordeal that lay ahead. The pilot's voice, calm and steady, came over the intercom, as he gave the final briefing, his words echoing through the aircraft, like a benediction. "Gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are approaching the drop zone. Please check your gear and prepare to jump. Remember to follow the planned exit sequence, and to assemble quickly on the ground. Good luck, and Godspeed." The words were like a mantra, a soothing balm to the frazzled nerves of the troops, as they steeled themselves for the leap into the unknown. As the aircraft flew on, the landscape below began to take on a new, ominous tone. with the trees and buildings seeming to loom larger, like sentinels guarding the approaches to the drop zone. The soldiers, with their eyes fixed on the horizon, felt a sense of trepidation as they gazed out at the unfamiliar terrain, knowing that they were about to embark on a journey from which not all of them would return. The air was heavy with anticipation as the troops waited for the signal to jump, their hearts pounding in their chests like drums as the aircraft flew deeper into the heart of enemy territory. As the battle commenced, the Allied forces, comprising of infantry, cavalry, and artillery, began to execute their meticulously planned tactics. The infantry, divided into 3 brigades, formed the core of the attack. The 1st Brigade, positioned on the left flank, consisted of 2 battalions of light infantry, who advanced in a series of rapid, sequential bounds, utilizing the available cover to minimize their exposure to enemy fire. Each bound was approximately 100 yards in length, with the infantrymen darting between the folds of the terrain, leveraging the natural undulations to shield themselves from the hail of bullets. Locally, the 2nd Brigade, stationed on the right flank, adopted a more deliberate approach, advancing in line formation, with the troops arrayed in 3 ranks. The front rank, comprised of seasoned veterans, provided a steady base of fire, while the 2nd and 3rd ranks, composed of more inexperienced soldiers, were tasked with reloading and supporting the front rank, creating a continuous and withering field of fire. As they advanced, the 2nd Brigade's artillery component, a battery of 6-pounder cannons, expertly positioned to enfilade the enemy's flanks, commenced a precise and calculated bombardment, targeting the enemy's strongpoints and disrupting their lines. Meanwhile, the 3rd Brigade, held in reserve, was tasked with exploiting any weakness or breach in the enemy's defenses, and was positioned to attack the enemy's rear or flank should an opportunity arise. This reserve force was bolstered by a contingent of elite cavalry, comprising of heavy dragoons and light horse, who would provide the necessary impetus to shatter the enemy's lines and create chaos and disorder in their rear. The cavalry, divided into 2 wings, was deployed on the periphery of the battle, with the left wing, consisting of light horse, tasked with reconnoitering the enemy's flanks and rear, and identifying potential vulnerabilities. The right wing, comprised of heavy dragoons, was positioned to deliver a crushing blow, utilizing their weight and momentum to shatter the enemy's lines. Create a decisive breakthrough. As the battle raged on, the cavalry wings began to execute a series of intricate maneuvers designed to outflank and envelop the enemy, and cut off their lines of retreat. The artillery, comprising of batteries of 9-pounder and 12-pounder cannons, was strategically deployed to support the infantry's advance and to pulverize the enemy's strongpoints. The gunners, expertly trained and highly disciplined, executed a complex series of fire plans designed to saturate the enemy's positions and create breaches in their defenses. The artillery's firepower was augmented by a contingent of howitzers and mortars, which provided a high-angle, plunging fire capable of clearing enemy trenches and redoubts. As the battle progressed, the tactical nuances of the Allies' plan began to manifest. The infantry's bounds and the cavalry's maneuvers created a fluid, dynamic environment in which the enemy was forced to respond and adapt. The artillery's precise bombardment and the supporting fire from the infantry created a maelstrom of steel and fire, which threatened to engulf the enemy's positions. The Allies' plan was a masterpiece of tactical complexity, a harmonious blend of firepower, maneuver, and shock action, designed to shatter the enemy's will to resist and secure a decisive victory. The enemy, however, was not oblivious to the Allies' tactics and had devised a series of countermeasures designed to thwart their plans. The enemy's calm and Vonder, a seasoned and cunning veteran, had anticipated the Allies' approach and had prepared a series of defensive positions designed to channel the Allies' advance and expose them to withering fields of fire. The enemy's infantry, arrayed in depth, with multiple lines of troops, was tasked with absorbing the Allies' assaults and wearing them down through sheer weight of numbers. As the Allies' infantry bounded forward, they were met with a hail of bullets, as the enemy's infantry, supported by artillery and cavalry, unleashed a devastating field of fire. The Allies' troops, however, undaunted by the intensity of the enemy's fire, continued to push forward, utilizing their training and discipline to overcome the enemy's defenses. The battle was rapidly becoming a test of wills, a clash of steel and firepower, in which the outcome was far from certain. The Allies' cavalry, meanwhile, was executing a series of daring maneuvers designed to outflank and envelop the enemy. The left wing, comprising of light horse, had successfully reconnoitered the enemy's flanks and had identified a series of vulnerabilities which could be exploited to devastating effect. The right wing, comprised of heavy dragoons, was poised to deliver a crushing blow, designed to shatter the enemy's lines and create a decisive breakthrough. As the battle raged on, the Allies' commander, a seasoned and experienced leader, continued to orchestrate his troops, expertly manipulating the tempo and tone of the battle. The commander's mastery of tactics and his ability to adapt to the fluid, dynamic environment of the battlefield was the key to unlocking the enemy's defenses and securing a decisive victory. The outcome of the battle, however, was far from certain, as the enemy continued to resist, and the Allies' plans were threatened by the unpredictability of war. The battle was a complex, multifaceted entity, comprising of numerous moving parts, each interacting and influencing the others. The Allies' tactics, though meticulously planned, were subject to the vicissitudes of war and the unpredictability of the enemy's response. As the battle progressed, the Allies' commander was forced to adapt and improvise, utilizing his experience and intuition to navigate the treacherous landscape of the battlefield. The enemy, however, was not a passive observer and was actively seeking to disrupt the Allies' plans and secure a victory of their own. The unfolding drama of the battle was a testament to the complexity and uncertainty of war, in which the outcome was never certain, and the participants were forced to confront the unpredictable nature of human conflict. The Allies' tactics, though sophisticated and nuanced, were merely one aspect of a far larger, more complex entity, in which the outcome was determined by a multitude of factors, including chance, luck, and the unforeseen consequences of human action. As the battle raged on, the Allies' commander and his troops were acutely aware of the stakes and the uncertainties of war, and were forced to confront the ultimate reality of human conflict, that the outcome was never certain, and that victory was always fleeting. As the enemy's artillery barrage intensified, the infantry units huddled together in their makeshift trenches, their ears ringing from the incessant bombardment. The 155mm howitzers, with their maximum firing range of 23 kilometers, were wreaking havoc on the battlefield, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. The soldiers' bodies were tensed, bracing for the impact of each explosive shell, their minds numbed from the relentless onslaught. The stench of sweat, smoke, and blood hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the carnage unfolding before their eyes. Meanwhile, the logistics team was working tirelessly to replenish the troops, ammunition, and supplies, their convoys navigating treacherous terrain to reach the front lines. The M109A7 Paladin self-propelled howitzers, with their 155mm M284 cannons, were being fueled and loaded with precision-guided projectiles, designed to strike enemy positions with deadly accuracy. Each Paladin had a crew of 4, who worked in tandem to load, aim, and fire the massive cannons, their movements a testament to the rigorous training they had undergone. The M109A7's maximum rate of fire was 5 rounds per minute, a staggering pace that could unleash a maelstrom of steel and fire upon the enemy. As the battle raged on, a squadron FAH-64E Apache helicopters thundered onto the scene, their 30mm M230 chain guns blazing as they strafed enemy positions. The Apache's advanced fire control systems, which included a targeting sight and a laser designator, allowed them to deliver precision strikes with ease. Each helicopter was equipped with a suite of sensors, including a millimeter-wave radar and a passive infrared countermeasure system, enabling them to detect and engage targets in real time. The pilots' helmets were equipped with a helmet-mounted display system, providing them with critical information on their surroundings, including the location of friendly forces and enemy targets. The chaos of battle was palpable, with soldiers scrambling to respond to the rapidly shifting landscape. A platoon of M1A2 Abrams tanks, their 120mm smoothbore cannons at the ready, pushed forward to support the infantry's advance. The Abrams' advanced armor package, which included reactive armor tiles and a composite armor array, made them highly resistant to anti-tank missiles and other kinetic threats. Each tank had a crew of 4, who worked together to navigate the treacherous terrain, their movements a testament to the rigorous training they had undergone. The M1A2's gas turbine engine, which produced 500 horsepower, enabled the tank to reach speeds of up to 45 miles per hour, making it a formidable force on the battlefield. As the tanks advanced, a wave of dismounted infantry followed, their M4A1 carbines at the ready. The soldiers moved swiftly, using cover and concealment to avoid the hail of bullets and shrapnel that filled the air. They were tasked with securing key terrain features, such as hills and ridgelines, which would provide them with a strategic advantage over the enemy. The infantry's movements were coordinated with the tanks and Apaches, who provided supporting firepower to suppress enemy strongpoints. The soldiers' communications equipment, which included secure radio networks and satellite uplinks, enabled them to maintain situational awareness and coordinate their efforts in real time. The battle was a maelstrom of noise and chaos, with explosions and gunfire echoing across the landscape. A soldier, his face smeared with dirt and sweat, peered out from behind a boulder, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the enemy. He was part of a fire team, which consisted of 4 soldiers, each with a specific role: the team leader, the rifleman, the grenadier, and the designated marksman. The team worked together seamlessly, their movements choreographed by months of training and drills. As they moved forward, they were acutely aware of their surroundings, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver and outflank the enemy. The enemy, however, was far from defeated. Their own artillery, which included 152mm howitzers and multiple rocket launchers, was pouring fire onto the battlefield, threatening to overwhelm the advancing troops. The soldiers huddled together, their bodies pressed against the earth as the explosions rocked the ground beneath them. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and cordite, and the soldiers' ears rang from the constant barrage. Yet, despite the chaos and the carnage, the soldiers pushed forward, driven by a fierce determination to complete their missions. As the battle raged on, the logistics team continued to work tirelessly, replenishing the troops, ammunition and supplies, and evacuating the wounded to medical facilities. The medical evacuation helicopters, which included UH-60M Blackhawks and HH-60M Pavehawks, were equipped with advanced life support equipment, including ventilators, defibrillators, and suction units. The medics, who were trained to provide critical care in the most austere environments, worked swiftly to stabilize the wounded, their movements a testament to their rigorous training. The helicopters' advanced avionics systems, which included terrain-following radar and forward-looking infrared sensors, enabled them to navigate the treacherous terrain, even in the most adverse weather conditions. The battle was a complex and dynamic entity, with multiple forces interacting and influencing each other in complex ways. The soldiers, who were the tip of the spear, were supported by a vast array of enablers, including logistics teams, medical personnel, and intelligence analysts. Each component played a critical role in the success of the mission, and the soldiers' ability to adapt and respond to the changing situation would ultimately determine the outcome of the battle. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the battlefield, the soldiers steeled themselves for the long and bloody fight ahead, their determination and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity, a testament to their unyielding commitment to their mission. As the clock struck 3:47 p.m., the battlefield erupted into a cacophony of chaos, a maelstrom of steel and fire that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. The air was heavy with the stench of sweat, smoke, and blood, a noxious odor that clung to every surface like a malignant entity. The sky above was a deep, foreboding gray, with clouds that seemed to swirl and twist in every direction, like a madman's brushstrokes on a canvas of despair. The ground trembled beneath the feet of the soldiers as the artillery thundered on, a relentless drumbeat that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. The boom of the cannons was like a living thing, a mighty beast that roared and spat fire, sending tremors through the soil and casting a pall of fear over the troops. The shriek of the shells as they sliced through the air was like a chorus of the damned, a blood-curdling scream that seemed to freeze the blood in the veins of even the most hardened veterans. In the midst of this bedlam, the soldiers clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury, their swords and bayonets flashing in the dim light like 1,000 tiny suns. The sound of clashing metal was like a symphony of death, a discordant melody that seemed to reverberate through every cell of the body. The cries of the wounded and the dying added to the chaos, a heartbreaking litany of pain and despair that seemed to echo through the ages. To the left, a company of infantrymen charged forward with a fierce battle cry, their rifles at the ready, as they clashed with a contingent of enemy troops. The two lines met in a flurry of blood and steel, the sound of gunfire and screaming men filling the air as they wrestled for control of the bloody earth. The soldiers were like titans, their faces twisted in a mixture of fury and fear as they struggled to gain the upper hand. One soldier, a young private with a look of determination etched on his face, launched himself at the enemy with a fierce cry, his bayonet flashing in the dim light as he thrust and parried with a skill that belied his years. His opponent, a grizzled veteran with a scar above his left eyebrow, met him with a snarl of fury. the two men clashing in a flurry of steel and fury as they danced across the battlefield. The private's bayonet sliced through the air with a deadly precision, striking true as it bit deep into the veteran's shoulder. The older man let out a cry of pain as he staggered backwards, his eyes wide with shock and fear as he clutched at the wound. The private stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion as he raised his rifle for the killing blow. But just as he was about to deliver the coup de grace, a bullet whizzed past his ear, sending him spinning to the ground as he clutched at his head in a desperate bid to avoid the hail of gunfire. The veteran, taking advantage of the private's momentary distraction, struggled to his feet, his face twisted in a snarl of fury as he launched himself at the younger man. The two soldiers clashed in a flurry of fists and feet, rolling across the ground as they wrestled for control. The private's helmet was knocked askew, his face a mask of blood and dirt as he fought to gain the upper hand. The veteran's eyes were wild with fury, his teeth bared in a snarl as he sought to crush the life from his opponent. As they fought, the battle raged on around them, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction that seemed to have no end. The artillery thundered on, the shells screaming through the air like a chorus of the damned as they tore the earth asunder. The infantrymen clashed in a frenzy of steel and fury, their rifles and bayonets flashing in the dim light as they fought for control of the bloody earth. To the right, a group of cavalrymen charged forward with a fierce cry, their horses' hooves pounding the earth as they launched themselves at the enemy lines. The sound of clashing steel was like a symphony of death, a discordant melody that seemed to reverberate through every cell of the body. The cries of the wounded and the dying added to the chaos, a heartbreaking litany of pain and despair that seemed to echo through the ages. As the cavalrymen charged, a cloud of smoke and dust rose from the earth, obscuring the view and casting a pall of uncertainty over the battlefield. The soldiers were like phantoms, their faces twisted in a mixture of fury and fear as they struggled to gain the upper hand. The sound of gunfire and screaming men filled the air, a cacophony of chaos that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. In the midst of this bedlam, a lone figure emerged, a general with a face like granite and eyes that seemed to bore into the soul. He stood tall, his presence commanding as he surveyed the chaos around him. His voice was like thunder, a deep and rumbling sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth as he bellowed orders at his troops. "Forward, men," he cried, his words carrying above the din of battle. "We must take the high ground. We must crush the enemy beneath our heels." The soldiers responded to his call, their faces set in determination as they launched themselves at the enemy lines. The battle raged on, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction that seemed to have no end. The artillery thundered on, the shells screaming through the air like a chorus of the damned as they tore the earth asunder. As the clock struck 4 p.m., the battlefield was a scene of utter carnage, a charnel house of death and destruction that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. The ground was slick with blood and mud, the air thick with the stank of sweat and smoke. The soldiers were like titans, their faces twisted in a mixture of fury and fear as they struggled to gain the upper hand. And yet, even in the midst of this chaos, there was a sense of order, a sense of purpose that drove the soldiers forward. They were like a well-oiled machine, their movements practiced and precise as they clashed with the enemy. The general's voice was like a beacon, guiding them through the chaos as they fought to gain control of the bloody earths. As the battle raged on, the outcome was far from certain. The enemy was strong, their lines unbroken as they resisted the advances of the soldiers. But the general was undaunted, his face set in determination as he urged his troops forward. He knew that the key to victory lay in the high ground, and he was determined to take it at any cost. The soldiers responded to his call, their faces set in determination as they launched themselves at the enemy lines. The battle raged on, a maelstrom of chaos and destruction that seemed to have no end. And in the midst of this chaos, the general stood tall, his presence commanding as he guided his troops to victory. The clock ticked on, each second stretching out like an eternity as the soldiers fought for control of the bloody earth. The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear. Only one side could emerge victorious. The question was, which one would it be? The once proud city lay in ruins, its streets now a testament to the devastating power of war. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and ash, the sounds of gunfire and explosions still echoing in the distance. The immediate aftermath of the battle was a scene of utter chaos, as survivors stumbled through the rubble-strewn streets, searching for loved ones or succor. Casualty reports began to trickle in, each one a stark reminder of the horrific cost of the conflict. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians alike had been killed or wounded in the fighting, their bodies strewn across the city like discarded dolls. The hospitals were quickly overwhelmed, their corridors and wards filled to bursting with the injured and the dying. Individual stories of survival began to emerge, each one a testament to the endurance and resilience of the human spirit. There was Maria, a young mother who had lost her husband in the fighting, but had managed to shield her children from the worst of the bombardment. She had huddled with them in a cramped basement, listening in terror as the battle raged on above, the sound of explosions and gunfire growing louder with each passing minute. As the fighting finally began to subside, Maria had emerged into the bright sunlight, her eyes scanning the devastated landscape for any sign of her loved ones. She had stumbled through the ruins, her children clutching her hands, as she searched for food, water, and shelter. It was a desperate existence, but Maria was determined to keep her family alive, no matter what the cost. Then there was Jake, a young soldier who had been caught in the midst of the battle. He had been separated from his unit in the chaos, and had found himself alone and adrift in a sea of enemy soldiers. With his rifle empty and his ammunition exhausted, Jake had been forced to flee, using his wits and his cunning to evade capture. He had stumbled through the wreckage of a bombed-out building, his eyes streaming from the smoke and dust. As he emerged into the bright sunlight, Jake had been greeted by the sight of his own troops, who had managed to break through the enemy lines and establish a foothold in the city. Exhausted and shaken, Jake had stumbled towards them, his arms raised in surrender, as his comrades rushed to his side, welcoming him back with open arms. The story of Amira, a young girl who had lost her family in the fighting, was another heart-wrenching tale of survival. She had been separated from her parents in the chaos, and had found herself alone and frightened, with no one to turn to. With no food, no water, and no shelter, Amira had been forced to fend for herself, scrounging for scraps in the ruins of the city. As the days turned into weeks, Amira had grown more desperate, her body weakened by hunger and thirst. But she had refused to give up, using her quick wit and her cunning to survive in a world that seemed determined to destroy her. She had formed alliances with other survivors, working together to find food and shelter, and to protect themselves from the dangers that lurked in every corner of the city. The international community was shocked and horrified by the scale of the devastation, as reports of the battle began to filter out of the city. World leaders convened emergency meetings, calling for an immediate ceasefire and a negotiated settlement to the conflict. But for the survivors, the diplomatic maneuverings were of little comfort, as they struggled to come to terms with the enormity of their loss. As the city began the long and painful process of rebuilding, the survivors were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They had lost everything: their homes, their families, their livelihoods. But even in the midst of such devastation, there were glimmers of hope, as people began to come together, to support each other, and to rebuild their shattered community. The city would never be the same again, its streets and buildings forever changed by the experience of war. But even as the survivors mourned their losses, they knew that they had to look to the future, to rebuild and to recover. It would be a long and difficult journey, but they were determined to create a new and better world, one that would rise from the ashes of the old. In the midst of such devastation, it was difficult to see a way forward, but the survivors were determined to find one. They had endured the unthinkable, and had emerged scarred but unbroken. As they began the slow and painful process of rebuilding, they knew that they would face many challenges along the way. But they also knew that they were not alone, that they had each other, and that together they could overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The road to recovery would be long and difficult, but the survivors were ready to face it, armed with their courage, their resilience, and their determination. They would rebuild their city, and they would rebuild their lives, creating a new and better world, one that would be worthy of the sacrifices they had made. The battle may have been lost, but the war was far from over, and the survivors were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that they would emerge stronger, more united, and more determined than ever before. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, the city slowly began to come back to life. The rubble was cleared, the buildings were rebuilt, and the streets were repaved. The survivors, once homeless and destitute, began to rebuild their lives, finding new homes, new jobs, and new purposes. The city would never forget the devastation it had endured, but it would rise from the ashes, stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. The scars of war would remain, a reminder of the horrors that had been inflicted upon the city and its people. But even as the survivors remembered their losses, they would also remember their triumphs, their resilience, and their determination. They would honor the memories of those who had fallen, and they would strive to create a better world, one that would be worthy of the sacrifices they had made. The city would rise again, and it would emerge from the ashes of war, stronger, more vibrant, and more alive than ever before. As we conclude our journey through the annals of military history, it is imperative to examine the long-term geopolitical impact of the events that have transpired. The repercussions of these conflicts have been far-reaching, with consequences that have resonated throughout the world. The delicate balance of power has been continually shifted, as nations have risen and fallen, each leaving an indelible mark on the global landscape. The aftermath of World War II, for instance, saw the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers, setting the stage for the Cold War. This era of ideological strife would go on to define international relations for decades, with the world teetering on the brink of nuclear war. The divisions created during this period continue to influence global politics, with the echoes of the Cold War still audible in modern-day geopolitics. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a significant turning point, as the United States emerged as the sole superpower. However, this period of unipolarity was short-lived, as the rise of China, India, and other emerging nations has led to a multipolar world. The shifting dynamics of global power have created new challenges and opportunities as nations navigate the complexities of a rapidly changing world. The legacy of colonialism also continues to shape the modern world. The artificial borders created by European powers have often led to conflict and instability, as nations struggle to define their identities and assert their sovereignty. The scars of colonialism run deep, with many nations still grappling with the cultural, economic, and social implications of foreign domination. In addition, the role of military technology has been a driving force in shaping the course of human conflict. The development of new technologies, such as drones, cyber warfare, and artificial intelligence, has transformed the nature of warfare. These advancements have created new challenges and opportunities, as nations seek to leverage technology to gain a strategic advantage. As we reflect on the long-term geopolitical impact of military history, it becomes clear that the consequences of conflict are far-reaching and complex. The world is a highly interconnected system, with events in one region having the potential to resonate globally. The study of military history serves as a reminder of the importance of understanding the complexities of the past, in order to navigate the challenges of the present and future. In conclusion, the legacy of military history is a rich and complex tapestry, woven from the threads of human conflict and cooperation. As we move forward in an increasingly interconnected world, it is essential to recognize the importance of understanding the past in order to build a more peaceful and secure future. The study of military history serves as a reminder of the devastating consequences of war, while also highlighting the importance of diplomacy, cooperation, and dialogue in preventing conflict. As the great Greek historian Herodotus once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." This phrase serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of humility and the need for continuous learning. As we strive to make sense of the complex and often confusing world around us, it is essential to approach the study of military history with a sense of curiosity and wonder. And so, as we bring this journey through the annals of military history to a close, I ask that you join me in continuing to explore the complexities of the past in order to better understand the present and shape the future. If you have enjoyed this series, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, where we will continue to examine the intricacies of military history and its enduring legacy. Together, let us embark on a journey of discovery, as we strive to uncover the secrets of the past and shed light on the complexities of the human experience. Subscribe now, and join me on this ongoing journey through the ages.